You may recall, in the days following the 2020 presidential election, claims that the vote had been stolen spread rapidly. Well before recounting concluded, courts ruled, or results were even certified. No institution had declared the election illegitimate. Most people knew that. But the claims took hold anyway, because that outcome felt plausible. What that moment, and the moments after, or even today, revealed was how political authority is socially assigned and withdrawn before institutional judgment occurs. Legitimacy no longer waits on recounts, court rulings, certifications. Instead, public recognition is increasingly shaped in advance, determining whether official outcomes will register as authoritative or be dismissed as already compromised by the time they arrive. It's what we think of as authority before process, or as I have in a larger piece, the pre-authorization period, we'll call it. I could say more about that later. Something has shifted in political life. Many of us feel disoriented, not just divided, but unsure who to trust, what counts as facts, or how power is actually being exercised. What we are experiencing is not just political polarization, but a deeper, foundational political dislocation, a fragmentation not just of opinion, but of the shared epistemological systems that once helped citizens decide what counts as relevance, evidence, and authority. For most of modern democracy, we've argued about who should rule. Today, we're confronting a different question. What is ruling? And whether we still recognize it as political power at all. Our political institutions were built for a world where power was mostly visible and accountable. Laws, our world argued, were written by people. Decisions were made by legitimated authority. Persuasion came from identifiable voices. That world, as we're watching over the past decade, 2 decades, has been crumbling, disappearing. This matters now because political influence is no longer limited by human scale. It can be automated, personalized, and deployed at a speed and scale that democratic accountability was never designed to be able to deal with. Imagine a political message, feels personal. Many of us have experienced this, I'm sure. It shows up in your feed, it sounds familiar, it echoes concerns you already have. Now imagine it wasn't even written by a human being. It was generated, tested, and delivered automatically, adjusted thousands and thousands of times for different audiences. In an algorithmic database, it's just simply an entry. Meanwhile, as big tech refines its avatars of who we are, what we value, believe, and cherish, and fear, political influence is no longer adjust to citizens, but to profiles. Profiles, these holographic selves, constructed from the data we have spent years supplying these companies and now used as the primary targets of our fears, our anxieties, our attachments, and our hopes. Some governments are trying to obviously regulate this. Others are racing to control it. And some have long treated information itself as a strategic weapon. Artificial intelligence, generative AI, does not change that strategy. It accelerates it. It lowers the cost of influence, increases the volume, and makes it harder to detect and easier to deny. This is why AI has become one of the most important geopolitical issues. The competition isn't just over technology, chips, or innovation, but about whose systems will quietly shape the world and whose political openness, societal openness, becomes a liability rather than a strength. Hint, democracies. This isn't confined to elections. It plays out in the daily life of democracy. Issues are framed, reinforced, and made salient long before facts or details have even emerged. But elections make these dynamics easiest to see, although I am revising this as we speak, just in light of previous months' experiences. Imagine two voters following the same campaign, yet inhabiting entirely different political realities. One encounters a steady stream of messages about crime and immigration, mugshots, images of riots. The other about corruption and the abuse of the rule of law, accountability. Neither sees the other's picture. Neither knows what the other is being shown. This is not accidental, right? Modern campaigns have relied on data analytics and automated messaging to segment voters using increasingly precise location and behavioral-based targeting, tailoring persuasion at a granular level. Artificial intelligence, generative AI, makes this process faster, cheaper, and largely invisible. When deepfakes enter the mix, the boundary between authentic speech and manufactured content becomes harder to detect in real time. The risk here is not that voters encounter false information. We already have that. It's that elections and democratic life more broadly stop functioning as shared experiences, these epistemic experiences, when citizens no longer deliberate over a common set of claims or facts. Trust erodes, not only in candidates or outcomes, but in the idea that democratic choice is meaningfully collective at all, as if it's even worthy of our effort. And this brings us to the hardest questions. Artificial intelligence raises ethical challenges that democracies are unfortunately poorly prepared to answer. Surveillance without visibility, power without accountability, and a populace subjected to levels of persuasion and propaganda unprecedented in scale and precision. When decisions are shaped by systems no one fully controls or understands, the deeper risk is epistemological. The shared background conditions that make accountability possible continue to erode like a glacier melting under the sun's strain, at first slowly cracking and popping, and then suddenly calving. Questions of who is accountable, who governs, and on whose behalf no longer feel urgent. They start to sound like artifacts of an earlier political imagination. Artificial intelligence does not doom democracy necessarily, but it exposes what democratic systems quietly depend on. Not only rules and elections, but trust, transparency, and shared understanding. In the age of algorithms, these conditions can no longer be assumed, I would argue. The question then is not whether AI will shape political life. It already does. It is whether the democratic societies will shape AI in return, or quietly allow governance to drift into systems that operate beyond public accountability and increasingly beyond the law. This, I would argue, is the challenge of democracy in the age of the algorithmic autocracy.